The extra deck is so still untapped. There are so many good cards that have not yet really been fully developed, or at least haven't been touched in years and years. So today we're doing a video continuing our series. We did fusions last time. Today we're doing synchros. 5 synchros that in the future will be good that have not been either in a really long time or really ever. This one's going to be a lot more potent than the fusion one. Inherently, fusions have some problems with being like generically abused, but synchros, exceeds, and links way more generically abusable. So we're going to have some good ones on here. Let's jump into this without further ado. Number 1 on the list. Trishula, 0 Dragon of the Ice Barrier, really, really powerful card. I mean, the main effect you're looking at on this card is when this card is synchro summoned, banish up to 3 cards your opponent controls. I love that this is cards. I love that this isn't face up. It is just any 3 cards up to also. So even if your opponent doesn't have 3, you can still trigger this. It's insanely powerful, obviously. So wiping apart boards, or just maybe even setting up a quick effect way to make this card on your opponent's turn even more potent as an interruption, insanely strong. Also, if it's destroyed by an opponent's card, you're going to get to float into a regular Trishula. I don't think that triggers its effects because it needs to be synchro summoned properly, but still you get a big body out of it, and then it negates like some cards you control, or it negates all the monsters your opponent controls and like cuts their attack in half, which puts you in a really good position. So really powerful card. I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen this card come through quite yet. We've seen a handful of other big synchros that you can make on the opponent's turn be relevant in certain synchro builds, especially with like Hulk allowing you to synchro on the opponent's turn really easily. But I still think the door is open for this card, and as we see more and more power creep in the game, sometimes we've seen that some of these synchros that require multiple non-tuners or multiple tuners, right, more than just 2 monsters to make, it's doing a little tough. But as we get more and more power creep in the game, I think we're going to find decks with engines that facilitate doing synchros for even like multiple material cards like this even easier. So I still think it has some light at the end of the tunnel for sure. Number 2, Adamancipator, Risen, Raptite. I know what you're saying, John, this was amazing in Adamancipator. I agree. But you know what? That's its own archetype. And I feel like this card is generically abusable enough that at some point we could easily see this come back into rotation. It doesn't even have to be a rock deck. That's what I love about this card. So I love about Dragite too. We saw Dragite see play in something like, oh my gosh, I'm brain farting now, Sword Soul. But that's because Sword Soul facilitates 8s and 10s specifically. And I think the biggest thing for Raptite is 6s and 7s tend to be the easiest synchro monsters to summon. 8s are kind of like right behind, but I think 6s and 7s generally end up being the easiest synchro monsters to summon because most tuners end up being level 1, 2, or 3. You don't see a lot of level 4 or higher tuner monsters, so the mid-level synchros end up being easier to make a lot of the time. And this card is just a straight-up interruption if you can get a wind monster engrave. Any wind monster. So if any wind deck that synchro summons, it comes into fruition, this card immediately becomes super, super playable. And it doesn't even have to be a wind deck. It just needs to be a deck that, via its engine, like gets you consistent access to a wind monster engrave. And for a lot of decks, that's not crazy. So I like this card. Really good stats. Pretty good. Just once per turn, every turn, banish a card. I love this is card 2, spells, traps, monsters from your opponent's grave. The game is more and more, graveyard dependent as we move forward. I love it. I think it's great. I think this is a great second option. Definitely a card I'll keep an eye on every time we get more and more, synchro archetypes. Number 3 on the list, Muddy Mud Dragon. Another card that's seen play one single time, but it was in a very particular type of deck. And this was Virtual World when they were using this to, I believe, cheat out Dark Dragoon. And which, by the way, was not always the most popular version of that deck. They would literally just cut this card. They would play the what's the Signers card called? Ultimaya Zulkin. They would play the Ultimaya Zulkin build sometimes. They would just play generic good synchros. They wouldn't want to hyper turbo into this card, but this card could allow you to make like the Invoked Kaliga or Dark Dragoon, I believe, because this card counts himself as a material for any fusion summon, right? Just kind of like King of the Swamp. As well as during your main phase, if you control the Synchro Summon card, you can fusion summon a fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters you control, including this card. So not only does he count as one of the materials, any material that has a specific name, but also is the fusion spell in and of himself. He makes for a very efficient fusion summon, especially in a deck that is more synchro based, which is really, really cool. I still believe we're going to find our way into a route where like this card can be like generically abused in a deck to make just like a really good generic fusion boss monster. But like maybe the engine in and of itself is more synchro based. So you synchro into him, then he gets you into the fusion side of your deck and potentially your biggest win condition depending on what monster you're trying to make. So I think that because he links synchros and fusions pretty neatly, I do think there is going to be an opening there at some point for him to come back into the format as a legit piece in like a competitive deck for sure. Moving to number 1, or I'm sorry, I guess this is number 4. I kind of counted backwards here. This card is something Kaliga. This is a new card in Darkwing Blast, but I will tell you what, I have not heard enough people just even mentioning this card. I know it's not a crazy card. It's not a card that's going to come out and like completely dominate the format, but it is a card that I do believe can and probably will come up down the line. This card has 2 main effects. I know it's in Japanese here, but I'll tell you what they are. The first one is basically that it's one of those quick synchro tuners, like Formula Synchron, like Excel, I think it's Excel Synchron, Desert Locust, TG Warner Magician, any of those, Shooting Riser Dragon, that during your opponent's turn as a quick effect, they can like help you quick synchro. Secondly, this card has another effect where if it's engraved, you can banish any other synchro monster in your graveyard to special summon it back to the field. That's actually really nice because what that means for this card is that even without trying to abuse it off of something like Halki Fibrax, you could still just kind of like synchro up through this card on your first turn. And as long as you put any other synchro throughout your combo in the grave, this card will still be able to bring it back for free. So you can even just do more synchro summons that turn. Or you just leave it on field, and now it is like going to operate as an additional interruption because it's going to get you another synchro summon on your opponent's turn. Obviously, in and of itself, it already is a new level, I believe, for Hulk. I don't think we had a level 3 quick synchro target for Hulk's like on the opponent's turn effect. So that's really nice because we had like I think we had 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and I guess Shooting Riser's technically 7 if you don't use his effect to like lower his level. So we had like everything but 3, I'm pretty sure. So not only does this hit another level, we're in a very particular combo line that you try to set up. Like this could be perfect, like maybe 2's too little, 4's too many, whatever. This could be the sweet spot. I do think this card is kind of a really nice, like just kind of synchro up card. Like if you make like this with Cupid Pitch and you synchro up into something else, you get a search off Cupid Pitch. This card comes back by banishing Cupid Pitch and you just get like a ton of resources, a ton of value off of your synchro plays. I do think there could be something there with these cards. So I like this card a lot. Really, really interesting. Very curious to see how it could come up. It is a low level. So I don't think stuff like Punk is going to be able to abuse it or anything like that. But, you know, we have so many good cards all over the game that, you know, eventually I think we'll have a way to abuse this card for sure. And number 1 on my list is Power Tool Braver Dragon. I think this card is so interesting. I'm very intrigued by this. I do think this card one day in the future will be crazy. Konami knows what they're doing. They know that equip spells have been pretty poop for all of Yu-Gi-Oh! They knew that Noble Knights were like a big swing and a miss. An archetype that was based around equips was destined to be poop. So when they came out and made Infernobles, they made stuff like Durendal, which is just like a straight up searcher in the form of an equip spell. Cool. That makes that equip like actually an equip you actually want to draw in your deck. 2, we have the new archetype Mikanko, who plays I think like 3 separate equip spells that are all solid in their own right. In which case, this card becomes even more interesting. So, I know for Infernoble this makes sense. I know for Mikanko this makes sense because you just summon him and then you equip 3 cards. You could equip the Mikanko spell that summons a Mikanko from deck. You could equip the Durendal to search a Dark Warrior at the same time, or a Fire Warrior, which, by the way, Mikanko has. One of their only, 3 monsters in the main deck is a Fire Warrior. It's one of their best monsters. Cool. That's another search target. I do think as we get further down the line, Konami's going to every once in a while revisit equip spells and be like, you know what, we got to modernize equip spells. Maybe one day we get a generic equip spell that's like kind of like an interruption. Like, while this card's equipped to a monster, if your opponent does this, you can send this equip spell to the graveyard to negate that effect, whatever, pop a card, whatever it is, like almost become just like a straight up interruption card. Its downside to be your opponent would be able to see it. It gets beat by kind of back row removal. But interruption is interruption, and when you have cards like Power Tool Braver that just gets you free, like equips like that, and I Sold, and all these other cards that kind of like abuse, and some of the like Infernobles that abuse equip spells like really well, and just get them for free, then we might be looking at something. So I do think over time we'll see this card get better and better, because just random, Konami's like, oh, random new like generic equip, that's like crazy. Like just generic card that like it's the first generic equip that like actually is playable in any deck. Something like that. I don't know where they'll do it, when they'll do it, but I believe they will. And until then, this is still going to be a solid card to make Mikonkos a little bit better, to make Infernobles a little more interesting. And I can't wait to see where he goes. Really, really cool card. He's also an interruption by himself. He's just an imperm. He sends an equip spell on him to the grave. And that could be another thing. We could see an equip spell that just says, like, when this, like, look at the Smoke Grenade of the Thief. When that card was just like sent to grave, boom, or it might have needed to be destroyed, but like same idea, like rip a card out of the opponent's hand. What if we got a generic equip that said, if this card's sent to graveyard by a card effect, like pop a card on the field, right? So that way Power Tool Dragon Braver would be able to like negate a monster by sending that new equip, and then get to pop something as well, right? Just upping the power of this card. You never know. The sky is the limit. That's a whole nother video to like talk about like what they could do to equips to make them better in Yu-Gi-Oh! But I think they will at some point. I think that's just the natural progression of the game and equips as a result. So there you go. There's my top 5 list. Obviously, Synchros is a much more robust list than like Fusions were. So obviously there's going to be a handful of things you could of Synchro Monsters you could definitely throw my way. So leave them in the comment section down below if you think there's anything that you think easily could have been on this list that I decided to leave off. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that down below. But I'm out of here for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.